In this episode, I'm going to go over how you can learn any new skill you want in less than 10 minutes a day. Most of us think that we need hours and hours of deliberate practice, and we treat learning new skills as an all or nothing approach. If I don't have a couple hours to dedicate to this thing, I'm not going to spend 10 minutes. And so I want to shatter that belief for you, hopefully, in this episode. And I also want to cover why I'm choosing to dive into this in the first place. Well, I've always been obsessed with skill acquisition. Pretty much all of my life, I've looked into all of the things that speed up the learning curve. And so there are things that I've tried and failed over the years that I want to share with you in this episode. And so if this is our first time crossing paths, by the way, my name is Misbah Hawk. In 2016, I started my very first podcast out of my childhood bedroom. Within a year, it helped me land my dream job in the Bay Area, fitness coaching, Fortune 1000 executives, and professional athletes. And now I talk and write about high agency thinking on the Habit Chess podcast and also on my newsletter, which, by the way, make sure to sign up for that in the description below. Now, for context, I have over a decade of experience in the strength and conditioning world. I've gotten to spend a lot of time in the fitness coaching space, working with a diverse variety of people from all walks of life. So anyway, let me take you back to when I first got really excited about this. So 14 years ago, or whenever the 4-Hour Chef written by Tim Ferriss first came out, I remember getting that book because I wanted to read the section about learning faster. The book was written to cover this concept. Now, I did find most of the book pretty boring at the time, if I'm being honest, but the one section that I was getting the book for was really something that stuck with me, for the next decade. And it was this concept of being able to take anything that you want to learn and writing all of the things that contribute to 80% of the results onto one page. So this is where the whole 80-20 Pareto principle, taking 20% of the things that contribute to 80% of the results in that skill, beginning to use that thinking and breaking down in one full page all of the things that you might need to know, so that you could kind of look at this as a refresher at any given moment and kind of be training your skill or using it as a map for where to go next. Now, I have since used this in so many different arenas, particularly in stand-up comedy. I did stand-up comedy for about 4 years, and when I was really trying to get great at it, I basically developed this one-pager of all of the different advice and things that I had heard other comedians say, mentors of mine say, peers of mine say, things that I was learning night to night in execution, assumptions I had, experiments that I wanted to try. These things were all compiled into one page that I eventually printed out and kind of revisited pretty often. So any new skill that you're doing, I think this is a helpful practice to start with, is how can we begin with, okay, what skill do we want to learn? And then begin to break it down into one page. But before you can do the one pager exercise, I think there's something important that you want to cover, which is purpose. The reason purpose, I think, is very important before you begin all the tactics of how you can learn faster is because it allows you to cut through all of the fat, cut through all of the noise, and focus on that 20%. And so let me share an example of coding. Okay, that's a skill that I wanted to learn for years. It was something where I would sign up for courses, learn Python this quickly, that quickly in 30 days, and I would never really follow through with it. But that's because my purpose at the time was just learning coding for the sake of coding. And just so I knew that skill and, maybe I could build my own app one day or something like that. But when I decided to start with the approach of, there's this app idea that I have, it's not going to take me crazy long, I think, to build, but instead of handing it off to somebody or hiring a developer, maybe I can use this opportunity to create the MVP version of this app and use it as an excuse to learn coding. So an example of an app that I had wanted to build for probably over 5 years at this point was this stopwatch where you could rename the laps. So instead of lap 1, lap 2, lap 3, I could rename it with what I did in that given interval and copy and paste those inputs out and put them in my notes. That's something that I had been doing for, years when I was fitness coaching, because you had like 60, 70 programs to deliver every single week. And so it was the kind of thing for each client, I would time how long it would take me to write those programs. And I have literally years and years of this where every session I would write down, you could see how many people did I even work on in that session. So I basically was inspired by taking that idea and was saying, okay, could I make this, right? So it led me into the next thing. Okay, what tools do I basically need? And Replit is the tool that I decided to go with. It's something that I had heard of at the time. I was excited to use. If you're not very familiar with coding, you can still use it to build something. And so now that I had this purpose of like, okay, this is the vision that I have for what I'm going to build. It's not just, what we used to do when we were in high school, like let's build a web page that says, hello world. It's like, who cares about that, right? It's like at the same time, you had Squarespace that could build you a really nice homepage, but like we're learning how to do hello world. So whenever you even want to learn the fundamentals, it helps to actually start with a purpose or a project in mind. So that's what I'm going to start with here. Okay. We're going to look at our constraint, which is about 10 minutes per day. And then the next thing that we're going to do is start with a project that has some purpose. So when you have a project that you're excited about, that you care about, okay, now I'm willing to actually be motivated, right? I'm giving myself the opportunity to be motivated, to learn new things, to work on what I have to do, because any new skill that we learn, this is the next section I want to cover, is struggle. Struggle is going to be something that is, you want to welcome it. I used to really hate the idea of experiencing struggle when I was learning a new skill. And I think that's what made me learn faster was, I didn't want to feel the frustration. I would avoid that by just trying to learn faster and faster. Really what happens is the better and better you get and the more that you learn, it's similar to when you are lifting weights and getting stronger. When someone is lifting weights, the amount of struggle they need to experience to actually get better is similar, right? Whether you have been doing this for 20 years, you've been lifting, or whether you had just started, working out in the past couple of months, the struggle, the intensity, the effort that each exerciser might be experiencing is going to be very similar, even though the loads that they are lifting are very different. The types of movements that they're doing are very different. But to each of them, the intensity that they are feeling, they're going at 70, 80% on most of their days, at least. I want to make sure to write down struggle here as something that we cannot avoid. Struggle is actually something that you are going to use to look at, okay, what is this telling me, right? Because wherever you experience a little bit of struggle, that is going to indicate some of what you need to work on next. Now, remember, since 10 minutes a day is not very long, we basically want to dive into the things on our one pager, which let me make sure to write down. A one pager, which is essentially the 80-20 rule for the skill that we are going to be learning. So if you wanted to learn coding, okay, what are all the things related to this project, right? The 20% of things that I need to learn, that I need to get good at in order to drive 80% of the results. Now, if you just thought without any project or purpose, you thought about coding or Python, what are the things that need to go on this page, that would look vastly different than if you start with the purpose of, okay, I want to build this stopwatch. I want to build this thing that allows me to copy and paste things out of there and paste into something else. How complicated would that be? And now my brain is just automatically working, right? There's questions that I'm asking and I'm naturally cultivating that curiosity, right? And curiosity is like the best fuel to keep you going when things get really hard. And so we've got purpose in our project. We've got the one pager that we're using, right? From that purpose, we're thinking of the 20% of things that are going to contribute to the 80% of results. And the struggle points are something that is going to be included in this. Anything that makes you struggle related to this skill is worth writing down on that one pager. So this is very similar to Kobe Bryant. When he was younger, he was really terrible at jump shots, right? And so what he would do was focus on one element of the skill that he was really bad at, which was just, shooting free throws or, shooting threes or whatever he was working on, dribbling with his non-dominant arm, right? Whatever these elements of the skill that he wanted to get better at was, he would literally just focus for 3-6 months at a time. Like, okay, I'm just going to focus on getting good at free throws or getting good at dribbling with my non-dominant arm. And part of that Mamba mentality is attacking what you are weak at. And part of that I think this is worth writing down, is awareness and honesty. So if we can deploy awareness and we can be honest about what we're good at and what we're not good at, what things we need to work on, and what is okay for now. The ability to call out what we are not good at is a skill in and of itself. A lot of people can't do that, right? It's very difficult to look inwards and say, I'm not good at this, or even to get specific enough to know what parts we're not good at. So making sure to approach this with awareness and honesty will give you a better path to finding what things make you struggle. Now, don't get me wrong. There are going to be elements of this skill that you practice which you're good at, and that is just repetition. You need to get those reps in, right? For example, if we're talking about writing jokes, it might be pretty easy for me to, write jokes about current events that are happening, right? And maybe I'm good at them. And so that's going to be something that I practice. Instead of just practicing that over and over because I'm good at it, I want to find an element of writing jokes that I'm not good at, right? Which might be editing and refining. So I'm good at writing raw jokes and a bunch of attempts down, but maybe I never go back and actually flesh it out and work it through to a point where it was good enough to take on stage. So that might be my struggle point, which leads me to the next word, is friction point. You could think of it as struggle if you want, but I also look at friction point as kind of the bottleneck. So what is the bottleneck that's preventing you from getting to the next thing? And you basically just want to solve the biggest bottleneck that's in front of you. So remember, for me, the app that I wanted to make, coding and learning how to do it, was the constraint, right? That was the friction point. Then it brought up the next thing. Oh my gosh, what am I going to use to code? I don't know how that even works, right? Okay, cool. Well, I solved that problem with Replit. Oh shoot, now the next friction point is that I don't know even how to use Replit, right? I need to learn it and get familiar with it. Okay, cool. I spent a couple hours on a weekend one time, just with the intention that, okay, I'm going to get set up. I'm not going to do anything crazy. I'm just going to get familiarized with it. And guess what? The thing that I wanted to happen, which might happen to you, did, which is after the 10 minutes that I had invested, I was like, okay, I'm only going to spend 10, 20 minutes doing this, right? I had gotten into such a flow that I kept going. And I had stumbled upon some progress that I did not expect. There was progress faster than I thought. And so I want you to keep that in mind when you are in these 10-minute sessions for whatever skill you're learning. Make sure to actually leave some room for, if you get in the flow, that you can go over. And sometimes you're not going to be able to do this at all, right? Because you just have a packed day. You might be able to only squeeze in the actual 10 minutes. But if you can, position that 10 minutes at a point where, hey, do you have a 15-minute buffer before the next meeting that you might have, so that, hey, if you get into a really good flow, we're not having to yank you out of that. Because the next thing that I want to cover is what would kill a lot of progress when you are learning a new skill, which is context switching. So when you are constantly jumping around and looking at your phone, looking at social media, or, looking at an email, those are all things that pull you out of the context that you're in. So you want to keep that in mind, because when you have only 10 minutes, you can't really afford to be pulled out of that for even 1 or 2 minutes, right? So the 2 words I want you to keep in mind for these 10 minutes is going to be focus and intensity. If you can apply focus to the actual aspect of the skill that you are working on that day, that session, and you can bring some intensity to it so that, hey, I can't be interrupted in these 10 minutes. You can't pull me out of a context here. You are going to have a much better chance of actually learning, absorbing, retaining, and building upon the skill day after day. Now, there's this concept that I want you to apply that's going to take the fear out of learning these new skills, because the next thing that I want to make sure to highlight is a lot of you learning this new skill isn't actually your ability to learn or the actual time that you have to learn or any of those things, right? It is a lot of the embarrassment, fear, guilt, a lot of the emotions that come with doing something new, right? Trying something new, being vulnerable. And if you've been an expert in the thing that you're doing, you're a banker, you've been a banker for 20 years, you're the top of your industry in that world, right? You feel really good about it. And then all of a sudden you're learning a new skill that puts you back into the feeling of being a beginner. It's not just about the skill and what you're learning. There's a whole amount of emotions that are associated with that you want to acknowledge and work through. What is that for you? Is it, I'm worried about what other people are going to think. I'm worried about being judged. It's good to call out whatever that is so you're not dancing around that. And so you can also be aware when it creeps up again. So you'll be able to notice it once you acknowledge, okay, this is typically my tendency. I tend to worry about being judged when I'm working on this skill. Okay, how can I remove some of that, right? You can now begin to play with some of that in your mind. So anyways, taking the fear out of learning new skills, we're going to use context mapping. Now, to me, context mapping is really picking another skill set that you're already confident in, well-versed in. It could be cooking, it could be fixing cars, it could be anything that you feel really comfortable with. For me, it was fitness coaching because I had been doing that for over a decade. So skill development, skill acquisition, running the business side of things, I really was able to pull a lot from that context. For me, it was being able to pull a lot from my experience as just training, right? Being in the gym, developing strength, developing conditioning, being somebody that was very skinny and not really fit at one point, not really aware of my body, not great at sports, to being somebody that got good at that. The process of getting good, building strength, developing your conditioning, that is something that has stuck with me for over 15 years. And it's something that I got to apply in a coaching context too. So for me, that is something that I can really model from. Stand-up comedy is another one for me. So because I was not good at the skill, I didn't have any of it, and I built it from scratch, I have a model for looking at new skills through that. And so the mapping aspect is really similar to when you upload a spreadsheet to another software, right? It's going to map the existing columns to fill out the fields in its software. So, okay, this is the name field, this is the email field, this is the phone number field. And it's essentially going to recognize what's familiar and automatically place that in whatever new thing you're uploading that spreadsheet into. So similarly, whatever new skill you are planning on learning, you want to look at the process of getting good at that in the lens of context mapping. So to recap really quick, you have only 10 minutes a day to start, which makes the project that you are working on very important and your purpose even more important, right? Because you're not going to stick to learning something new that brings up a lot of fear or embarrassment if there's no existing motivation that goes with it. So you want to spend a lot of time on this part first, right? Then the next thing is going to be figuring out your struggle points. Okay, what are the things that you are struggling with in regards to that skill? So for example, two people that are trying to get a pull-up, yes, there are similarities in the types of patterns that they might need to train to build the strength for that pull-up, but both people have different starting points, right? One person might need to work on their grip versus the other person, their struggle point is really their scapular stability, right? Their shoulders. So you have to look at it from that lens. What is my specific struggle point? And then we're going to list all of the core things that you feel that you need to know related to learning this skill. And your one pager is going to look very different from my one pager, even if we're covering the exact same skill. Because again, our struggle points are different. What we're paying attention to, what we're trying to get good at, what we're applying it to are all different. And so to do that, you're going to apply the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule, looking at, hey, what 20% of things can I work on that would get me 80% of the way there, that would get me 80% of the results? Maybe not the full thing, but I would be pretty well versed. Like, I don't know how to code everything now, right? But I know how to code well enough where, hey, I focus on the 20% of things to where I built the thing that I wanted, right? So you've now made it so that there are outcomes and feedback loops instead of just this open-ended commitment to learning a new skill like coding, because that is a lifelong thing, right? Which leads me to maybe the final part here, which is this is hopefully a lifelong practice for you. Maybe the skill that you are learning changes over the years, but being able to learn new things constantly in 10 minutes a day is a superpower if you can follow this process. So remember, the next point is awareness and honesty. Where am I actually, facing a bottleneck? Where is there friction? We're going to break those friction points down into training exercises. So the idea here is being able to take, okay, if I'm not very good at improv, I was not very good at crowd work and riffing and things like that. I had to get good at it in stand up, right? So whatever the friction point for you is, if you can, you're going to take that and develop exercises for that friction point. So for example, the person who's trying to get a pull-up, but they are lacking in grip strength, right? That's the friction point. So for that, we need to develop training exercises. There's so many ways to train, getting rid of that friction point. You could hold heavy dumbbells by your side, right? You could walk with heavy dumbbells or kettlebells by your side. You could do both arms. You could do one arm. You could hang on the bar for 5 seconds at a time, 10 seconds at a time. If you're really good at hanging from the bar, you could add weight and you could do weighted hangs. You could do passive hangs where you're relaxed while you're hanging. You might do active hangs where you are actually rolling the shoulder blades down while also training your grip strength. So there's so many different ways to tackle the same thing. You might not even do it just that directly. You might do a compound exercise like heavy rows because, hey, I need to focus on some upper pulling anyways. And if I'm doing heavy rows, I'm working on my grip strength at the same time. So being able to look at things that way and develop training exercises or mini games for yourself is possible. You don't need someone else outside of yourself to do this a lot of times. It's possible for you to do it if you can identify the things above that we just covered. So remember, the 10 minutes that you are spending diving into these exercises, you don't really want to pick things that it takes you just like 20 minutes to warm up for this thing. That's an example of doing, let's say, a really complicated, heavy back squat. If you only have 10 minutes to be able to just do heavy back squats and tap into a level of intensity, it is not possible because you need time to warm up. So pick certain things that you can actually dive into that feel easy to train. If you are somebody who's working on your writing, okay, I'm going to focus on working on my headlines. That's something that's a part of my writing that I want to get better at. So now we've taken it from this lifelong, big, giant, scary skill of writing and brought it down to like a project. Okay, if I get good at headlines, that applies to a lot of things that I do where I can actually, test and try and get feedback on, am I getting better at this? Now, the exercise for those headlines might be, okay, I just need to write more. I need to come up with volume. So I'm going to try to write in 10 minutes 10 different headlines, and I'm not going to focus on perfection here. The goal of this training exercise is going to be speed. The same way certain exercises are performed with speed or for the intention of speed, and certain exercises are performed for the intention of strength, right? So we're going to apply that same concept to this. Now, the way that you are going to check in with yourself and see, am I improving? Am I getting better? What do I focus on and work on today? You are going to be actually knocking out the biggest struggle point that is related to that skill. So for me, let's just say it was headlines. Each day, you might do different exercises. So it doesn't have to be, I write the 10 headlines every single day, and that's my only practice that I do. Because guess what? I might get comfortable with that. I might gain that a little bit. And now I'm not getting to push my brain and struggle as much, which means there might not be as much learning and retention happening. So now I'm going to evolve that into something else, right? I might do that every other day. And then in the days between, what I focus on is writing hooks or reading more headlines and finding examples of, what do I like about this? Pick a couple models of people that are doing this skill really well. But the one thing that I want to warn you of with just going after this approach, because this is what most people do when they want to learn a new skill. I want to get good at basketball. Let's see what Michael Jordan's doing, right? And you look to see all the things that are out about Michael Jordan, and they're basically things that he did when he was already Michael Jordan at the peak of his career. And so you want to look at the things like, for example, I mentioned Kobe Bryant and what he did when he was like 10, 11, 12 years old. He was like at a summer camp? And what are the types of, how did he break skills down? How did he train and get good at parts of basketball when he was that age? Not when he was already Kobe Bryant on the Lakers, but when he was in his formative years. So that's a caveat that you want to keep in mind when you are learning from celebrities or the top performers, because that's who we're drawn to. When we dive into any new skill that we want to get good at, our algorithm and everything is going to serve us the top of the top people in that craft, in that skill. But often what you're looking for is, what are the things they did when they started, right? And some of them might be too advanced where they can't really connect to that anymore, which is fine. This is where the plus minus equal theory comes in handy. So the plus minus equal theory is something that I heard from James Altucher, again, a decade ago, probably on his podcast or something. The idea is that you are always learning from somebody who knows more than you, right? That's the plus. Then you are always teaching something to people who are a step or two below you. So that's the minus. And then you are always, conversing, or you are connecting with people who are equals. So if you have those three stages in regards to the skill, where you have somebody who's a couple steps ahead of you, somebody who you're teaching the same thing to, who's a couple steps behind you, even if it is just the grandma test, right? Explain this in a way where my grandma would get it. That alone, when you have taken in a piece of information or gotten done with 8 minutes of your practice session, to actually put that on paper, like a summary of what I just learned, what I got out of today, that is very, very important, right? Because you are going to distill down certain learnings and observations that you may not have gotten in just that practice time. It only comes after the fact. So those are the ways that you're going to find people who are already executing this skill in a way that you want. And you're going to use them as examples, like, what do I like about what this person is doing? I may not agree with everything that they do or everything that they say, but what are the things that are drawing me to them? Because oftentimes that is a mirror into some of the things that we might be interested in for ourselves. I guarantee that if you take all of what we talked about today and begin executing it, this 10-minute principle of training this new skill is so fun and addicting at a certain point, because you're actually doing it, right? There's some momentum that comes with knocking out 10 minutes. You don't want to break the chain. You want to keep going. Versus if you're like, oh, I'm going to spend 2 hours of deliberate practice every single day on this thing. Guess what? After a few times of you missing it, or even when you do maybe get close, you didn't hit the full 2 hours, all that is taking away momentum that is pretty vital when you are in the stages of learning a new skill. I hope this episode was useful. I hope it gave you some tools, some ways of thinking that will make this process easier for you. And of course, drop a comment. I would love to hear what you thought about this. Reach out to hi@habitchess.com. I always love hearing from you and how you are implementing the stuff on this show. And make sure to check out the Habit Chess newsletter and get signed up for that in the description below. But thanks again for hanging out, and I will see you on the next one.